you want to learn how to write and you're not sure where to start, would you guys like to see my query letter? So how much money do you tend to make from a publishing deal? Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video, I wanted to share with you basically a masterclass of everything a person would possibly need to know if they wanted to become a traditionally published author. For those of you who don't know, hello, my name is Christy. I am soon to be a debut author. My 1920s inspired adult fantasy novel, Theodora's Tea Shop, is going to be out next year in July. I'm so excited. Pre-orders are available now. You can also add the book on Goodreads and Storygraph. I'll pop all of those links in the description down below if you want to check out my novel. Basically, I've vlogged the entire thing from doing draft one, through the querying process, through to going on submission to publishers, and eventually selling my book at an international auction, which was really cool and exciting. I have benefited so much from other writers, authors, literary agents, and people in the publishing industry making these kinds of videos, explaining how this works, talking about the specifics of the query letter, explaining how to get a literary agent, explaining exactly how it is authors get paid by publishing. In this video, I want to get into all of the nitty-gritty stuff, but I also want to give you guys tips and tricks for writing your first novel. And essentially, if you want to become a novelist, or if you know someone who wants to become a novelist and you have questions, I just want this video to be a thing that you can just give to someone and be like, here is everything you need to get started. It's going to be a huge video. I have 13 pages worth of notes. I will also add that I'm going to pop the notes to this video onto the free tier of my Patreon. Now, these notes are not going to be edited. I'm just letting you know that. That's why they're going on the free tier. But just in case you want to read through the notes that I made for this video so you don't have to like scribble anything down, I'm just going to chuck those over there. I have a big cup of tea. I have a puppy who is due to wake up in the next 40 minutes. We will do our best. We will get started. And before I jump into this video and I tell you all the things, I just wanted to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Saily. Saily is a simple eSIM app that helps you stay connected in over 200 locations across the world. As you guys know, I love to travel, and being a writer and working on projects wherever I am, I know the importance of having easy access to the internet. With Saily, you just choose a data plan, install it on your phone, and you're good to go. You can access the internet anywhere without expensive roaming fees. With Saily, you don't have to waste time waiting for a physical SIM card to arrive. You don't have to worry about faffing around at the airport trying to find where to get a SIM card, and you also don't have to worry about swapping out SIM cards when you change countries. You just download Saily once, choose your regional or global plan, and you're done. Saily is easy, quick, and affordable. It can help to protect your privacy with its ability to change your virtual location and also block malicious ads. Saily's built-in ad blocker also stops browser ads from loading and can reduce data usage by up to 28.6%. Please click the link in the description down below to check out Saily and use my code ChristyAnnJones to get an exclusive 15% discount on all Saily data plans. Number one, you do not need to write every day in order to be a writer, in order to be a novelist, in order to be a successful author. The sort of like cardinal rule of you have to write 1,000 words every day in order to be a writer, in order to be a professional, has been grandfathered into traditional writing spaces for such a long time. The idea that you have to write every single day, otherwise you're not passionate about it or you're not serious about it, is so incredibly stupid. I think it's a little bit ableist. I think it's a little bit classist. I think it doesn't factor in the idea that most writers have full-time jobs. A lot of writers are parents or full-time students or have disabilities or chronic illnesses or other considerations that make it so that they cannot write every single day. So first of all, you do not need to write every day in order to become an author, and also you shouldn't really be listening to any prescriptive advice. Like, writing and making art is such a subjective and personal thing. We all get there in different ways. All you need to be a writer is to just sit down and write, and ideally sit down and write consistently. You also don't need to aspire to become a professional novelist in order to be a writer. Some people love writing and they don't love the idea of going through publication. Some people just love having it as a hobby. Some people like posting to blogs or writing fan fiction. You can be a writer and write stories and get a lot out of this experience without necessarily having to chase after publication. Sitting down at your computer and writing and immersing yourself in a story is very, very different to the business of pursuing traditional publication. You can just love writing and have that be enough. You don't have to aspire to being a traditionally published novelist. But that being said, I am going to speak for the rest of this video as if you want to be a professional, traditionally published author. And a traditionally published author is someone who is published with a publishing house like Hachette or Penguin or Text or any of the many publishing houses that there are out there on the market. I would also say as well, the best thing you can do early is set realistic and kind goals. I think anyone who has sat down having never written a word of creative writing writing in their life who says to themselves, I need to be a New York Times bestseller, I think that is misplaced energy. I think saying I need to be a bestseller, I need to be a superstar author making millions of dollars, not all bestsellers make millions of dollars, but anyway, there's a big difference between saying I need to be a bestseller in order to be happy and I would like to be an author, right? One of those is a lot more achievable than the other. There are a lot of people who are making amazing books, earning small amounts of money, who have achieved their dreams of becoming an author, and what I would say is don't shoot yourself in the foot early by creating unrealistic expectations for yourself and then chasing after them. I have always told myself I want to be an author, I want to be traditionally published. Doesn't matter to me about any bestseller lists, any amount of royalties, any amount of advance. You also don't need to be a successful short story writer or poet or essayist in order to be an author. These are all different mediums. I, for example, am much better at writing novels than I am at writing short stories. I love short stories, I love poetry, I love all of these things. I was a professional travel writer for a number of years there, but my medium is the novel. That's where I've spent all of my time and that's where I've perfected my craft. By all means, feel free to cut your teeth on short stories, on poetry, but don't expect yourself to master the short story in order to become a novelist. It's not an apprenticeship for writing novels. One is a sprint and one is a marathon, and you train very differently for both. You also do not need to be a content creator to be an author. You don't need to be an influencer. You do not need a massive, huge audience, which is a question that I get constantly, and I understand why. I know I have a platform. So for anyone who watched my querying video or submission video, I hope that that gave you the evidence that you needed to know that even if you have an audience of 200,000, people will still actively reject your book and it might not help. And maybe it's a little bit different for someone who has millions and millions of followers. But if someone has that kind of audience where their name can just get them a book deal instantly, that's basically a celebrity book deal. And probably as a reader, you might come to, say, Millie Bobby Brown's book a little bit differently to how you would come to someone else's book. You go there with the caveat that that person has a name elsewhere and that might be part of why they have the book deal. So I get hounded with this question. Do I need an audience? Do I need a YouTube channel? Do I need a TikTok? Absolutely no, you don't. I'm begging you, go to Goodreads and scroll through the bestsellers and ask yourself how many of these people are content creators. To put this into perspective, I've spent 10 years building this audience on YouTube. I never set out to be a YouTuber. I never intended for it to be my job. You know, I was working in marketing, COVID happened, I almost got made redundant a bunch of times, the YouTube channel was making money, here we are. I fell into this, right? But it has taken me 10 years to build this audience. And given that my publishing deal isn't even in the same region where most of my audience is, it didn't really make that much of a difference in the end. So I would say to you, if you have 10 years to put into something, put it into writing. To any bitter person in the comments who says, oh, they only give book deals to influencers now, that is categorically wrong. It's not true. A good book and a good writer will out. If you write a book that's amazing and it will appeal to people, you will get a book deal. I know that having an audience will help. It's a little push to help the tide, but it's not going to be the thing that makes you V.E. Schwab or Donna Tartt or Kazuo Ishiguro. It's not going to win you the Nobel Prize for Literature having a YouTube channel. So if it takes 10,000 hours to master something, that's 2 hours a day for like 13 years? Is that what I wrote? 13 years. So I would say get started now and stop worrying about all the things that you are not and all the things that you do not have. Just sit down with the page and get started. And finally, on all the things you do not need to be in order to be an author, you don't need to be traditionally published in order to be an author. There are wonderful niches out there for self-published authors. There are a lot of self-published authors doing amazing things, making really good money, having wonderful, successful careers. The self-publishing space is only growing. I have myself previously self-published a book. I spoke about that a little bit more in a Q&A I recently did, so I'll pop that in the description down below and go watch what I said in the Q&A on traditional versus self-publishing, because we don't have time, because I've already been filming for a long time and I've barely left page 1. Building the skills to become an author who could win themselves a publishing deal. First of all, the only thing you need to do to be a writer is to write. I'm going to keep hitting home about that. You don't need a degree. You don't need a master's degree. You don't need a fancy course. If someone comes to you and they say, I make $10,000 a month from my writing, you can do the same thing as me if you only buy my course. Run in the other direction. That person is not making $10,000 a month from writing. That person is making $10,000 a month from selling courses resources to people. I would say think really, really critically about giving your money over to conventionally attractive, overconfident strangers on the internet. There are a lot of free resources you can use, and beyond that, again, the best thing you can do sorry, Mabel's just poking her head out of her pen. The best thing you can do in order to become a writer is just to write. I think she's going to come and say hi. I need to move this lamp. I'm a working mother, guys. I need to manage this. Oh, hello. Do you want to say hi to everyone? You've just woken up. Yeah, basically, please don't get scammed by anyone. There are so many free resources available. For example, Brandon Sanderson is a really famous fantasy author. He has a whole series of lectures on fantasy writing. Okay, I can bring my lamp back now. She's taken up her little spot by the window. We're safe. She'll be there for a while. But yeah, basically Brandon Sanderson has a series of lectures on YouTube which are free to watch. Those lectures are better and more specific than anything I actually paid to study during my undergrad. So I love those lectures. I think that they're great. I think that there are also a lot of books you can borrow from the library. My favorite writing craft books are The Anatomy of Story. I think this is really, really good, especially for beginners, especially if you want to understand big structural things about story. It has a lot of great examples for learning prose. I really like several short sentences specifically because of the examples at the back of the book. Some of the book feels a little bit up itself to me, but the examples at the back are excellent. Save the Cat is a really, really popular one, Save the Cat is a screenwriting book. Save the Cat Writes a Novel is the novel writing one. Basically the same thing. I think the meat of the value you get out of this book is the one infographic that breaks down story beats, and then also The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr., not Shrunk. I thought it was Shrunk for many years. This is a really, really small and simple book on grammar. It's very, very thin. This one focuses on American grammar. American and British and Australian grammar are slightly different. For example, doctor has a full stop after it in American English, but it doesn't in British English. Words like verses, where the final letter abbreviates the word. In Australian English, you don't need the full stop after that. For example, in American English, you do. We use it though for etc. because the C in etc. is not the end of the word. It's not the last letter. So there's a few little things that we do differently stylistically, but I think it's a really helpful small book for understanding grammar because I've found that the more and more Microsoft Word uses AI tools, the its grammar abilities have become. So many things are genuinely just wrong and it's really frustrating. MS Word kind of doesn't know how to use an Oxford comma anymore. Some Oxford commas have to be there, some don't have to be there, some are stylistic, and it kind of depends on what you're writing as to the rule. MS Word's new grammar function doesn't pick up on that nuance, and it messes with your voice. It tells you to change certain words that certain words don't belong. It's just frustrating. So at this point I've turned off everything in MS Word aside from spelling, because I do need help with spelling. And beyond that, if you want to learn how to write and you're not sure where to start, pick out your 3 favorite novels, reread them slowly, and then sit down with a pen and paper and write out the story beats. Write, this happened to the main character, and because of that, this happened, and because of that, this happened, and because of that, this happened. Ask yourself what you feel at the 20% mark, the 30% mark, the 50% mark. Do you feel really engaged and excited, or does it feel like there's somewhere in the plot that is a bit slow and meandering? That could be an indicator that the pacing could be tightened. Is there a spot in the story where things feel a little bit rushed and you get from A to B to C a little bit too quickly? That's an indicator that maybe that part of the story could be fleshed out a little bit more. Start critically analyzing your favorite books. Ask yourself what you really, really like, what you don't like, what you think could be stronger, and start building up that analytical part of your brain, because that will really, really help you when it comes to your own writing. And beyond that, finally, just sit down with a document and write. It's gonna take many, many hours. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you need to finish things in order to learn how to write novels. You need to get really good at middles and endings, and middles are the worst to write. Endings can be quite tricky. Done is better than perfect, and it's really, really important to learn how to finish things and also just accept that it's going to take a long time. You just need to sit down and get started. Building the muscles / writing routine. Remember the sprint versus marathon analogy I made? You wouldn't just get up and run a marathon, would you? You need to train for it. You need to do not walk on the laptop, miss. You need to train for a marathon. You can't just get up and suddenly run 50 I don't know how many kilometers are in. Don't expect yourself to write the perfect novel on the first go. And also, writing a novel is not just sitting down in front of a blank page and just typing quickly until you hit 100,000 words and then calling it done. That is not the process of writing a novel. It tends to be a lot more meandering than that. It's also brainstorming, plotting, researching, editing, rewriting, going back and rereading your work, going through a lengthy editing process. Writing a novel takes a really, really long time, and it's just that kind of thing of once you're in the doldrums of the 40,000 word mark, the 50,000 word mark, the 60,000 word mark, it is going to be difficult. It's always going to be difficult. It's difficult for me, and I wrote of my first novel the equivalent. So I tend to start novels entirely from scratch if they're not working in order to learn. With my first novel, I did that about 7 times. With my second novel, Theodora's Tea Shop, that's the one that won an amazing publishing deal at auction. I rewrote that book, I think 5 times. I'm now rewriting Spiegel Tent, my next novel. I'm on the second rewrite of that. So that's like the equivalent 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. It's like 13 novels right there from start to finish, plus all the editing time, right? I have written from start to finish about 13-ish novels, the equivalent of. I still find middles and endings really, really difficult. So I would just say, give yourself some grace, give yourself time to build up the stamina and really, really commit to the fact that this is going to take a long time and you can do it. And also do your best to find a way to silence that inner critic who says, it's not realistic, it's probably not going to happen, it can't be for me, because it does happen. And why not you? We don't all need to aspire to being New York Times best-selling authors, but there's no reason why you can't become a writer. There's no reason why you can't become an author. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, South Australia. I got told not to bother to apply to university. I got laughed at when I was working minimum wage, and I dared to mention that I wanted to be a novelist one day. So to that, I would say, why not you? Why couldn't it be you? Make space for the blind and silly faith that you will need in order to achieve this dream. Because if you set out to become an author, lots of criticism and rejection are heading your way. They're absolutely unavoidable. So you need to be your own biggest cheerleader. You need to take this dream seriously yourself. You need to stop asking, do I deserve this? Is this possible? Am I good enough? All that stuff, throw it in the bin and just sit down and start writing. Okay, tools. I write with Microsoft Word. For better or for worse, it's what I've been using since I was a child. I've always written into documents on computers. I love MS Word. I wish it would stop using AI tools. All right, okay, small intermission while I deal with this little one. Having a break. We're gonna have some lunch. You're gonna go for a little walk and then you're gonna go to bed, yeah? Again, I spoke about this in the last video, my thoughts on AI and writing. My feelings are just don't touch it. When it comes to writing, don't write your query letter with AI. The literary agent's gonna know, and I feel like that would be the fastest way to get blacklisted by a literary agent. So as I said, what I do with MS Word is basically I just turn off almost all of the grammar tools. So Microsoft Word is the industry standard for publishing. You will need to have some sort of software that's Microsoft Word compatible because people use track changes to do edits. So for someone starting out, if you don't want to spend any money, you can use Google Docs. Google Docs is of course free. However, I have heard that it tends to struggle when you get over the 10,000 word mark. And then there are also bespoke tools like Scrivener. Scrivener is specifically made for writers and it's really, really popular and it has a lot of different tools that you can use as a writer as well. Beyond that, I do also like to use spreadsheets. I tend to do this on Google Sheets and I'll just do the little calculation of total number of words, percentage of the story complete. I do all of the formulas for that myself. I also love using Millernote. Millernote have sponsored this channel before. I love working with them. They're a great visual planning tool. Obviously, they didn't sponsor this video, but you can sign up for Millernote for free. I really, really love this for doing like digital sticky notes. Sorry, she's playing with a coat hanger. Either she plays with a coat hanger or this video doesn't get filmed today. This is where we are. I also really love Notion for task management. This is another one that's free. And then beyond that, I tend to have a writing notebook where I jot down all of my ideas. Every single project has its own notebook. Strategies to help you write your very first novel. The biggest and best strategy that I have developed for myself, it's a very, very simple one. It's giving yourself the permission to write this draft of the story. And this is going to be helpful for the chronic overthinker, overcritical perfectionists among you who really, really struggle to get words on a page because you feel like maybe the words aren't good enough, you don't know what the story's supposed to be yet, you struggle to get started because it just doesn't feel right yet. I tell myself the first draft is meant to be bad, and that is what editing is for, and just really giving myself permission to not switch on that critical part of my brain really helps me. And I kind of find that whenever I go back and look at that first draft, look at that second draft, and I see what I wrote, it's never ever as bad as I thought it was at the time. And this is a strategy that's helped me with article writing, with essay writing, with everything. Literally just the idea that done is better than perfect, and that you don't need to be perfect on the first go. I have also historically really enjoyed doing little writing sprints to kind of unblock my brain if I'm at the beginning of a session, if I'm new to a project, if I don't know what to write. I really love picking random words and then setting a timer, and then just essentially word vomiting for the amount of time that the timer goes for. So I'll start with 60 seconds and then go to 2 minutes and then go to 5 minutes. I'll pick words like lampshade or earnest or drink bottle, and I'll just literally write whatever comes to mind. And it doesn't have to be about that thing necessarily, it just has to be words on a page. I don't really need it anymore, but I've also found the Pomodoro technique really useful. This is a technique where, again, you set a timer for 20 or 30 minutes, you work those 20 or 30 minutes, and then you set a 5-minute timer and you take a break. I'd strongly encourage you to not use your phone during this time. Don't use anything that's going to spike your dopamine and potentially send you down a completely different rabbit hole. I would say get up from your desk and just walk around. Or I used to, when I was in high school, I used to do this. I used to play Animal Crossing on my DS for 5 minutes, then I'd work for 20 minutes and do 5 minutes of Animal Crossing. I kind of find that after the third cycle of doing this, I don't need it anymore. My concentration is completely unblocked and I can just concentrate forever and ever. So you've used all these techniques, you've done all the learning that you needed to do, you've found a way to sit down at your desk consistently, get words on the page, you've written your first novel. What do you do next? So basically what you do next is you put your novel aside and you walk away, ideally for at least a month. It's so helpful to return to a story with fresh eyes, reread it from start to finish, and really get a bird's eye view on what the story needs. So the best thing you can do once you finish your story is set it aside and go try and work on something else. And also don't hold yourself to the idea that you need to have the novel that gets you a publishing deal. I know we all sit down, write the novel, get really attached to it, but it's very uncommon to get a publishing deal off of your first novel. It does happen. It's happened to a bunch of different people. So for me, it was my second novel, but I would say finish writing your first novel, set it aside, start thinking about the next thing. Don't be too precious about any one specific story, because the thing that's going to make you a writer is not one book. It's not one work. It's going to be a body of work. You've written your novel. Congratulations. Well done. You've got your 70,000, 80,000, 120,000 words down the page. You've edited it. It is basically free of typos. You've looked at things like story structure and character arcs. You've gone through the process of learning about all of these things. Your book is thoroughly polished. No, you do not need to pay a professional editor. I'm going to keep returning to this. If you want to be traditionally published, you don't have to part ways with any money to begin with. If you're going to self-publish your book, yes, you'll need to pay an editor, you'll need to pay a cover artist, you'll need to pay X, Y, and Z person. But if you're going down the traditional publishing route, do not waste your money on a professional editor. That is what the publishing house does for you as a part of their role of taking you on. So don't feel like you have to spend any money. Edit the work yourself, build up that skill, learn how to do it, critically analyze your work, say, how could this be better? How does this compare to my 3 favorite books, the ones we looked at earlier? Once your book is polished and it's sitting in the best place it can, it's time to start thinking about literary agents. So what is a literary agent? A literary agent is the person who represents you as an author for ideally your entire career. Although you query your literary agent with one specific book, they will ideally represent you for all of your books. There are some certain instances where an author will pick up a pen name in a different genre. They'll write kids' books in addition to writing adult books, and sometimes that literary agent doesn't really have the skill set to do a different genre or a different age group. So sometimes people will have different literary agents for different pen names, but generally your literary agent represents you for all of your books that you write. Your literary agent is the person who sells the book for you. They're the person who knows all of the good editors in publishing. Their strength is their ability to read contracts, to negotiate, and to know exactly who the best person is to send your book to. There used to be a time where you didn't necessarily need a literary agent, and indeed in a number of different markets you still don't need a literary agent. For example, in France, apparently, I've been told like 3 times now, you don't need a literary agent in France. So I assume it also happens in different countries. I think someone mentioned it was the same for Italy, because because those markets are much, much, much smaller than the English speaking market, you submit straight to the publishers. If you're a native English speaker, you're at a massive advantage if you want to be an author, because we actually have the biggest publishing market. I do believe we're quite a bit bigger than China. So you're at a massive advantage if you're a native English speaker and if you're writing in English. And within the world English market, which is the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the Commonwealth, all the various Commonwealth countries, including South Africa, India. Yep, I think India is a part of the Commonwealth regions. And you also have random, like there's English-speaking bookstores in Japan, for example, right? So the English-speaking market is absolutely huge, but of the English-speaking market, America is by far the biggest one. People are spending the most money in America, the biggest deals are happening in America, and America just has a huge population and a huge number of people buying books. So because the English-speaking market is such a big market and there's so many publishing houses and there's so many writers trying to get publishing deals, literary agents have basically become non-negotiable for all of the big publishing houses. It is still possible to get a publishing deal without a literary agent if you're going directly to a smaller publisher, or say, for example, maybe a medium-sized publisher in a place like Australia where the population's a little bit smaller. The most common type of literary agent nowadays is the editorial agent. So the editorial agent is the type of literary agent who is going to help you polish up your book before you send it off to a publisher. There are still literary agents that aren't editorial, so basically they'll take your book as it is, they'll go off and sell it, they won't give you any suggestions of things to change. I deliberately wanted an editorial agent with my agent Bailey, and I'm so incredibly glad that she has an editorial eye, because we ended up spending about 10 months editing the book, and A, we got an amazing publishing deal, and B, now that I'm at the stage of actually going through the edits with my publisher, I've been told that the book is already a bit ahead of where books tend to normally sit around this stage, so thankfully the process of editing the book with Bailey has actually saved me a little bit of work, which is really, really nice. So why get a literary agent? Mainly because you don't have a choice. If you want to get a really big, bold publishing deal at a big publisher, you need to get a literary agent. Now, I'm in Australia, my literary agent is in the US. If you're outside of the US, you can submit to US literary agents. If you're outside of the UK, you can submit to UK literary agents. I've had a few people ask me if I'm from India, if I'm from the Philippines, can I still submit to these people? Absolutely. They don't care where you are, they just want a really good book to sell. So it doesn't matter where you live, you can submit to the US or you can submit to the UK. I don't know why you would submit to Australia. We don't have nearly as many literary agents, and basically in Australia, it's almost impossible to find literary agents that represent fantasy or most genre fiction. They do exist, there's like one or two, but generally if you're Australian and you write genre fiction, you're gonna want to look overseas. There are pros and cons of getting a US agent versus a UK agent. You can think about currency differences and time zone differences. How easy is it to jump on a call with that person? Where are you most likely to sell your book, etc. I'll get into the literary agent percentages in a second, but basically in the end I didn't really mind whether it was a UK agent or a US agent. I actually thought that I was going to get a UK agent, and then I picked Bailey, who was in New York. How do literary agents get paid, and do they cost a lot of money? This last question I still get a lot, and it really surprises me. People say like, oh, is a literary agent expensive? They don't cost any money up front. Like, I have at no point sent money or given money to a literary agent, to a publisher. I've spent no money on Theodora's Tea Shop in any capacity beyond like buying some research books and paying for MS Word and stuff that I've had to do on my own end. You do not pay the publisher, you do not pay the literary agent. If a literary agent comes to you and says, hey, I'll take on your book for a fee of $5,000, you run the other way. If the literary agent comes to you and says, I'll take on your book if you pay my friend $5,000 to edit it, run the other way. If a publisher approaches you and says, hey, I'll publish your book, just pay me first, run the other way. All of these are scams. You do not spend any money out of your own pocket. The way a literary agent gets paid is through the publisher. When you get paid your advance and your royalties, that's when your agent gets paid. Your agent tends to take a 15 to 20% cut of whatever you make as an author. And the general rule is that having a literary agent is going to earn you back that money anyway, because obviously back in the day before literary agents were essential, they would get much, much higher deals. And again, if you have a literary agent, they are experts on negotiating contracts. That whole thing is their entire job. Your literary agent will tend to take a 15% cut in the region in which they operate. And then if it's a foreign deal, deal, it tends to be a 20% cut because oftentimes your agency will have a foreign agent who has to help out and they deserve to get paid too, so it's a slightly higher cut. So when I said you can think strategically about different regions, if you think, oh, I'm going to sell a lot more books in the UK than I will in Australia, probably go and get a UK agent than an Australian agent, right? Because if your agent is in the UK and they sell to Australia as a separate book deal, as a foreign book deal, it depends on how they do it, depends on if it's Commonwealth and a bunch of complexities. But if your agent is in the UK and they sell to Australia as a foreign deal, the rate that will go to your agent from your cut will be 20% in Australia and 15% in the UK because they are a UK agent. If you wanted to swap those around, if it's an Australian agent, it's a 15% cut in Australia and a 20% cut in the other foreign regions. Does that make sense? If the agent sells a book in the region in which they live, you as the author make a little bit more money. So how do you find literary agents to submit your book to? The easiest thing you can do is go to your bookshelf and pick a book that got published in the past 5 years. This one is pretty essential. Don't pick up a book from 20 years ago. Pick a book that was published relatively recently. What are we picking? This is me realizing that none of these books were published recently. They're all, my new releases are on the other shelf. Let's just go with the Gracekeepers. Okay. Pick a book that you really, really like, which you think is similar to your book. Ideally, you want to pick a book that has sold relatively well, that you think would appeal to the kinds of readers who would like your book. You go to the acknowledgements at the very, very end of the book. There's always an acknowledgements section, unless you're listening to an audiobook, in which case there will not be one. Acknowledgements section right at the end, and you go and find out who is the literary agent of the books that you really, really like. You take that person's name and you Google it. You go to their website / their agency's website once you've found it through Google. You go and see if they're currently accepting submissions, and then you read all of these submission conditions really, really, really carefully. The literary agents will all ask for different stuff, and it is so incredibly annoying. Like, I really struggled with this part of submitting to literary agents because my attention to detail on stuff like this is very, very bad. So in a second, I'll talk about the types of things you submit to the literary agent. But basically, you find this first person who you really, really like, and then you go to your next favorite book and your next favorite book. And once you've built up your small list of dream agents, you start building your list from there. You Google best literary agencies in the US, in the UK, in whatever region, best literary agents for whatever genre you're doing. You can use Query Manager / Query Tracker as a resource, but do not treat it as if it's gospel. There's a lot of stuff which is incorrect on Query Tracker. There's a lot of stuff that's out of date. Please do not use the submit all function. There's a lot of agents who are listed as representing genres that they actually don't represent, or will say that they're open for submissions when they're not. Literary agents get really, really irritated when you don't listen to them, which is fair enough because they receive 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 submissions every single year, and they tend to sign maybe 1 or 2 people. So please don't waste their time. Please read their requirements for submission and keep in mind that when a literary agent is reading submissions, this is work that they do unpaid. Again, your literary agent doesn't get paid until you get paid, which means that literary agents sink years of time into authors, into books that sometimes don't get book deals. So they do a lot of work that is uncompensated. So be kind, be patient, and understand these people are working very, very long hours and they are doing their best. So on this one, I would just say have the patience to learn about the different literary agencies, to start working out which are the good agencies, which have a good name. You can go onto Publishers Marketplace to see which agents are making deals and who's selling what. And basically, I would say to be really thoughtful and careful about who you submit to and who you put on your list. You don't want to submit to 100, 150, 200 people in the very first go. Number one, 150 agents, in my opinion, is way too many. There's no way that you would be super duper thrilled and excited to be working with every single one of those people. For me, the sort of tap out number was about 50 or 60. This person is supposed to work with you for your whole career, right? I found about 50 or 60 really, really good agents that I wanted to submit to. That was the maximum for me. And the answer to well, what happens if I submit to all of them and I get rejected? The answer is you write a new book and you try again, which is what I did. I wrote a book back in 2020. It failed dismally. I came back. I did it again. We did it on the second go, right? Don't submit to everyone on the first go, because if your query letter needs some work or if you've made a mistake or something, it's really good to just test with like the first 5 literary agents to begin with and then start slowly sending out to more. And so in this kind of way, you can beta test whether your query letter is good, whether your elevator pitch is strong. You can try to get some feedback from the agents early on and then change your process. I rewrote my query letter so many times. I would highly recommend you setting up a spreadsheet to keep track of everyone, to keep track of the specifics of each requirement. Some literary agents want your query letter plus a synopsis plus 20 pages. Some want just the query letter. Some want the query letter plus 50 pages. Some want the whole manuscript. Some want a 10-page synopsis. Some want a 2-page synopsis. Some want a 1.5 pages. Yes, it's some people want a PDF. Some people want a doc. Some people want an email. Some people will hate you if you send an email. It's also different. It's also complex. And again, literary agents are doing the reading work for free. So just do your best. Yes, it's time consuming and irritating that they're all different. Yes, you need to do a good job at this and you need to have the attention to detail. Just do it. It's fine. Just do it. It's annoying. So what do you put in your query letter? Would you guys like to see my query letter? I will show you. Let me look up my very first email to Bailey. Originally, I wasn't going to read out the query letter, but I figured I've popped it on the screen, so I might as well read it to you. This is the query letter that I sent my literary agent, Bailey. I sent a few different versions of this. As I said, I edited my query letter a lot, but this was probably the most consistent style of query letter that I did. So anyway, without further ado, Dear Bailey, given your love of heartbreaking yet hopeful stories, rich world-building, and Studio Ghibli, I hope you will consider my 106,000-word adult contemporary fantasy novel, Theodora's Tea Shop. The book will appeal to fans of the atmospheric, imaginative setting of The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, as well as lovers of the gothic twists and nuanced female characterization of Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I will add as well that I did tend to tailor the comp titles depending on the taste of the specific agent. You want to make sure that this section is in some way personalized so that you can show that you've done your research and you would be a really good fit for this person. Moving on to the next paragraph, my novel takes place in Aliasta, a 1920s inspired city where spirits and demons live openly, a la Spirited Away. The witch Theodora is the empress of an underground syndicate peddling illegal magic through the quaint facade of her tea shop. An esteemed oil painter one day, a member of parliament the next, the many eccentric faces of Theodora have charmed power from the city's elite, demons and mortal gentry alike. However, when she's sought out by a timid young woman named Dot who begs to become her apprentice, and a Byronic but irritable magician named Leo, Theodora collides with her dark past, which threatens to topple her empire and take her with it. So this paragraph is essentially the blurb of the story, and the kind of formula you need to use in order to write the blurb is, here is my character, here is the status quo, but, and that but is the central conflict of your story. So moving along, Theodora's Tea Shop is brimming with gothic archetypes, found family dynamics, and awkward, unrequited, and tragic examinations of love. It contains monstrous women as well as explorations of masking and the performance of the self. It's an examination of how we change for others and how we can learn to love and forgive who we are. I am a writer and content creator from Adelaide, Australia. My book-themed YouTube channel has over 200,000 subscribers, and the video series I produced on the writing of the novel under the alias of Project Teacup has amassed over 800,000 views. My short stories and non-fiction work have been published widely in Australia and Japan, and I was recently a guest at Bellingen Readers and Writers Festival where I participated in panels and interviewed authors. I put in this last one to show that I can do public speaking and I like going to events, so that's why I added that last sentence. I've attached the final manuscript for your consideration. Currently, I've received one full manuscript request for the novel. In terms of future projects, I'm now working on an epistolary gothic fantasy about a young woman who works in marketing and is swept into the eldritch and ultimately deadly world of a cursed circus. This is now more of a cursed festival than a circus, but anyway, that's Project Spiegel Tent. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to hear from you soon. All the best, Christy, and then my email signature. So basically, to break down the query letter, this is what you send to the literary agent as the body of the email. You want it to be able to fit very easily on an A4 page. Don't be cheeky and just write like a teeny tiny little font and think that that is what's going to make a query letter really good, is if you shove in as much as possible. A good query letter is concise, to the point, and sells the idea really strongly. So what you need, first, before you start writing your query letter, is you need your elevator pitch. What is your one-liner? What is the thing about the novel that makes it jump off the page, that makes it interesting and cool? Like, think about stories that you really, really love, and then write a little elevator pitch for those stories, and then come back to your novel and then try to write the little like 1 sentence or 3 sentence, this is what the story is about. So for me, that elevator pitch is this second paragraph. This is the most important point of the query letter. Basically, the best strategy I've heard is to open with a small paragraph that explains to the literary agent why you specifically picked them and shares potentially some comp titles. So I've compared my book to The Night Circus and Mexican Gothic. Second paragraph is basically the blurb of the story. Third paragraph is a little bit about the themes of the story. The next paragraph is just basically about me, my background, my context. I share that I have a YouTube channel in there. And then the final one just says, I've attached the manuscript for your consideration. Everything is really warm, professional, to the point. I remember my first queries that I sent back in 2020. They were stilted and formal and written in a voice that didn't really sound like me. And I think the fact that I tried to make those query letters sound way too formal, I think that kind of revealed my age because I was really young, and it revealed my inexperience. And I decided that for me, for my personality, for my culture, I'm Australian, I'm not going to send an email to someone that says, "Dear Madame" or "Sir." I had to get back into the habit of being really formal when I would email Japanese clients when I was doing travel writing for Japan. And so I had to like context switch real quickly to be like back in formal speak. But so like being Australian, working in Australian environments, and even now emailing people from other countries like America, the differences in formality are actually quite different. It's so interesting. But I figured if I emailed someone and they didn't like me calling them by their first name, that's probably not going to be someone I'm going to want to work with anyway, right? Because that's probably like a personality clash. Like I wanted it to be a little bit more laid back and informal and just warm, like professional but warm. That was my vibe for the query letter. I would say, do not copy this query letter verbatim. Please don't. Please don't. Could you imagine if every single person who watched this video just went in and used this and then whacked in some synonyms and changed it? All of the literary agents would just be like, what is going on? So look at this and then go look at other examples of query letters and then pick and choose what you think is good. Again, there's no real hard and fast rule here. You just want to make sure that you're listening to what the literary agent has asked for, and also you want to make sure that it sounds strong. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be strong, right? And also free of typos. You definitely want your query letter to be free of typos. So you've got an amazing query letter all written, you've got your book polished and ready to go, you've got your synopsis, you're all ready, you start submitting to literary agents. What happens next? So basically what's going to happen is one of a few things. Number one, they may not respond to you ever at all. That happened for me for about 40% of the literary agents, just no response at all. That does tend to happen when you submit short stories, when you submit pitches. A lot of the time people just don't respond to you, and it's maddening, and I hate it. I hate it so much, but it is what it is. What you could also get is a form rejection. So a form rejection is a copy-paste rejection from a literary agent that just says, thanks, but no thanks. It's just not for us. It's just not the right fit. The next thing that could happen is potentially a revise and resubmit, which is where the literary agent says to you, hey, I think you've got something here. I want you to change X, Y, and Z. And it's your choice as the author to decide whether or not you think that work is worth it, whether or not you really, really value this literary agent's opinion, and whether or not you think that that's a good change to make. Because the thing is that a revise and resubmit is no guarantee that they're going to take you on. So it's up to you as to whether you want to sink that time into what they've asked for. And then finally, if you're really, really lucky, what will happen is a literary agent will get back to you and they will say, oh my God, I really love this. Please send me the rest of the book. And then from that point, they might say, thanks very much, but it's not for me. If someone requests your book, they'd better respond to you after that, because I think that's incredibly rude if they don't. I think everyone did respond to me after I submitted the book. For one of the agents, it just took like 3 months and it was a whole thing, but it's fun. If you send the full manuscript, maybe expect it to take a month or two for them to read it. Like, it does take them a really long time, maybe like a month, I would say. What I would say actually is when you submit your book to them, ask them how long they expect it's going to take. Just be like, hey, I'm so excited for you to read the book. Can I please ask, just for my context, how long do you think it will take you to read it? If they read the book and they don't love it, they'll come back and hopefully give you some tailored feedback to say, hey, this was good, but the voice doesn't work for me. Or this was good, but I think it should be written in a different perspective. Something that they can't fix, or they'll just say, hey, I just think this book isn't for me. Because again, keep in mind, these literary agents are only signing 1 or 2 people per year. They need to really, really, really believe in you and your career, and they need to sort of have that evidence on the page. And then finally, what could happen is they read your book, they love your book, they'll say, oh my God, I really enjoyed this. Let's set up time for a meeting. And then you'll have the meeting with the literary agent. And during that meeting, they may offer you representation. For some of us went through the experience of having 2 separate meetings with literary agents, which were an hour long, in which the book got just torn to absolute shreds. I think I'm still a little bit shell-shocked from that experience of like desperately wanting this and then going through an hour each of people telling me all the disparate reasons my book wasn't working. But obviously it did have a happy ending because the 3rd literary agent did offer representation, and then of course the other 2 offered representation, and then a bunch of other ones offered representation as well. So we ended up with 6. But if I'm being really honest, I think we would have ended up with more if we had have had a bit of a longer time, because I had a few agents actually get back to me after my deadline. It was almost Christmas. There's a vlog. You can go watch the vlog if you'd like. You hop on the call with the literary agent. It's not a job interview. They're not sitting over you. You don't have to convince them that you know what you're doing. You're just having a chat to see if the both of you are compatible working with each other. So questions you can ask the literary agent are things like, what's your communication style, and how have you gone working with other clients, and can I please speak to those other clients as a reference for you, which I did for all the literary agents. I got references for everyone. I did double check. What did you like about the book? What would you change about it? What is your standard turnaround time for edits on a book? How long do you expect each draft to take? Do you think we're going to have to do drafts for publication? Do you know of editors you want to submit this book to? There are a lot of different questions you can ask. Alexa Donne is actually a really, really good resource for these kinds of questions. So I'll link her videos and her channel down below. So I watched a bunch of her videos. The big, really crappy part of going through the querying process though, is the fact that it takes a really, 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 really long time. And it's so frustrating because you spend all of this time writing a novel, you spend potentially years writing a novel, as I did, you start submitting and all you get is rejection. There's no celebration. There's no like, hey, oh my God, this is amazing like thing that you did straight away. You start with rejection and silence, and then hopefully after a little bit, you start getting requests on your novel, right? So what I would say to that is the second you start querying, go and write another novel. Go and throw yourself into literally anything else. Pick up a new hobby, start hiking, start knitting, start weightlifting, whatever it is that you need to get your mind off of querying. Please go do that thing, because querying will take a really, really long time. And I became incredibly depressed during that time. It sucked. I hated it. Facing those rejections during that time was a truly experience. I hated it so much. It was awful. Do whatever you can to take your mind off of it and just accept the fact that it could take 6 months. It could take a year. Best case scenario, it doesn't take that much time. I think it took 3 months for me. Those 3 months were some of the longest of my life until I went on submission with publishers, which was much, 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 much worse. It's now like 2 p.m. I'm gonna go take a break and then come back and film some more. Third warm beverage of this video, and I'm now gonna move on to the final part, which is about publishing. So in publishing, there are different tiers and different sizes of publisher. You'll often hear people speaking about the big 5 or the big 4 now that Simon & Schuster has been acquired. So the big 4 publishers are Hachette, HarperCollins, Penguin, and Macmillan. Those are the 4 biggest publishers in the world. For a lot of people, it's a dream come true to get a publishing deal with one of the big 4 publishers. These big publishers will also have imprints within them. So for example, Harper Voyager is an imprint within HarperCollins that specializes specifically in fantasy books. And so all of those little imprints are still under the umbrella of the big 4. There are also medium-sized publishers. So I believe Bloomsbury, for example, in the US is a medium publisher, but it's a much bigger publisher in the UK. away. Then you have the smaller publishers as well. Now, you don't necessarily need to go after a big publisher. A publishing deal is a publishing deal, and if you go with a smaller publisher, you still could be a runaway success. Like, there's nothing stopping that from happening. Basically, if you go with a bigger publisher, they tend to have bigger budgets, they tend to give bigger advances, which is significant because it's the main way that authors get paid. And if they have a bigger budget, a bigger advance, it tends to mean a bigger marketing push, which again is just that big first wave that can really, really help you straight out of the gate. I think what a lot of people don't really think about very much when it comes to marketing, and hello, for those of you who don't know, my background is in marketing. I have a commerce degree. I had a career in marketing. A lot of people, so the marketing machine of like big publishing is significant. It will make a really, really big difference. However, it's not everything. A big viral success can happen from a book from basically any publisher. Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes blew up while it was still a self-published book. It's kind of that fixed and variable thing where marketing is indeed the first push, but it kind of depends on how steep that hill is as to how quickly the book is going to pick up steam. But yes, definitely a big marketing budget can really, really help get those first few sales, but a book can still flop, and a movie can still flop, and all these things can still flop if you don't get that word of mouth, if it doesn't appeal to people, and there's so many different market factors that come in. It's the same with YouTube videos, and it's the same with every piece of art. Again, film, books, if people like it, they're gonna like it. So people freak out about big marketing budgets, small marketing budgets. People blame their PR people for not pushing and not doing enough. And it's such a funny thing that if a book isn't working or if a product is flopping, people blame the marketing straight away. It's not always the marketing. Sometimes it is the product. So basically, yes, marketing is good to have, but it's not everything. If the book is good, the book is going to get readers. So how much money do you tend to make from a publishing deal? It honestly really, really depends. So basically what happens is you get a literary agent, your literary agent submits your book to a publisher. Publisher takes the book to an acquisitions meeting. They say, we think it's going to appeal to these people. They run your book through a little formula based on comparative titles. So if the publisher said, we think this book is very similar to The Grace Keepers by Kirsty Logan, we think it's going to sell a similar number of copies, they'll put your book and this book and whatever book, they put things through a formula based on comparative titles, and they'll spit out a number that they feel comfortable spending on your book. I think that happens after the acquisitions meeting. Maybe it happens before, I don't actually know, but budgets do obviously factor in here. Once you have people at the publishing house who love your book, they've got the number they want to spend, they'll come back to you and they'll offer to buy your book, right? There was a trend a little while ago where a bunch of authors revealed how much money they got paid for their debut book and some of their other books. I think the main one I remember is V.E. Schwab getting paid $20,000 for The Near Witch. To my knowledge, the standard amount that you'll get paid as an author is about 10 to 20 grand for your debut novel. To my knowledge, that is kind of the smallest amount that you will get paid for your work, right? So $10 to $20,000 USD for your advance. If you're going with a really small press, maybe that number's going to be closer to like $500 or $2,000. Maybe it will be smaller, but for a big publisher, you're probably not going to see a deal below $10,000. This is what I've heard. If the publisher really, really wants your book, they might offer a bit more money. If multiple publishers want your book at the same time, they might go to auction and that might drive up the price. So for me, that actually happened. I was really, really lucky. I had multiple publishers wanting my book. I ended up with a international auction, which is really, really cool. And so I was very lucky to get a really good publishing deal for Australia, the UK, the Commonwealth region, for Theodora's Tea Shop. Really, really cool. It was very exciting. I'm still not entirely sure how that happened, but that is what happened to me. So essentially, what is an advance? How does this work? How do you get paid? So basically what happens is you will get paid a sum of money by the publisher as an advance for your book. It's generally the only money that authors ever get paid for their work because a lot of authors never earn out their advance. In fact, that's the most common outcome for authors. So you might say, Christy, how does publishing make a profit then? And the answer is the Tolkien estate. The answer is Fourth Wing and 50 Shades of Grey and every big whale series. So whales in marketing and in product stuff. A whale is basically like a product that makes the most of that company's money. And then you use that money to fund other books. The reason that publishers can afford to lose a little bit of money on some authors is because they're making bank on other authors. Let's get into the maths of this and I can explain how the money works. Let's say that you have been given a $10,000 advance for your publishing deal. Congratulations, that's a lot of money, well done. So $10,000, that's your lump sum payment. But what will tend to happen is that payment for a debut author will be split into 4 over the course of about 2 to 3 years, depending on how your timeline falls. So generally, you'll get the first $2,500 when you sign the contract. You'll get the next $2,500 when you submit the book. So this payment can come at the same time. Of course, if you're doing nonfiction, you sell the book based on a proposal. So you get that contract money, you write the whole book, then you submit the book, you get that second bit of money. But if you're already submitting a complete book, you get both of those at the same time. You get the third amount of money when the book comes out, and then sometimes you get the final bit of money 1 year after the book comes out, when the paperback releases or when the trade paperback gets released, depending on how everything works. However, if your book is a success and you're very lucky, if you earn back all the money of your advance, you will start earning royalties. So how does a person do this? Basically, let's say you got paid $10,000 for your advance for your book. Let's say that you as the author make a profit of $2 per book sold. That's fairly standard. No, it's not very much money. $2 per book sold. Let's pretend for a second that you don't have a literary agent. So in real life, your literary agent is making a cut of this. Let's keep in mind, but let's ignore them for a second. $10,000 advance. You as the author earn $2 per book sold. You need to sell 5,000 copies in total in order to pay back your advance and start earning royalties. Royalties get paid generally every 6 months, and then I think it's like 2 or 3 months in arrears. You as the author sell a copy of your book in January. That money's not hitting your bank account until August-ish, depending on how that falls. And so this is one of the reasons why it's so important for authors to have jobs and to have other sources of income, because even if you make $100,000 from your book deal, that payment is split over the course of 2 to 3 years. And also it doesn't factor in how much time it took you to actually write the book to begin with, right? So I'm really, really sorry, but it's not the type of thing where you can quit your job today and just give this dream a go, because if you, best case scenario, if you wrote an absolute masterpiece tonight, like if you sat down, wrote an 80,000 word masterpiece, even if you submitted that to literary agents tonight, you'd still have to do edits, right? You'd still have to go through the process of getting a literary agent. You still have to go through the process of submission. Even if you wrote a masterpiece today, it would still be about 2 years or slightly more before that book is sitting on a shelf. It still could be at least 18 months or 2 years before you see any money at all. This is an industry that works really, really slowly, and there aren't any runaway overnight successes. The timelines are just way too long. There are a few other little nitpicky money things with publishing that you should probably know. For example, you probably don't want to sell world rights on your book if you can avoid it. So the main reason why you don't want to sell it is because, to my knowledge, every 5 years, the foreign rights revert back to the author, right? So if you're an author and you sell the rights to translate your book into German to sell in a German market, every 5 years, those rights revert back to you and the publisher needs to rebuy those rights for you. So have a think about all of the huge best-selling books that are worldwide bestsellers in 30 different languages. Every 5 years, those publishers are having to go back to that author and rebuy all of those foreign rights. But if you sell world rights straight off the bat, instead, all of that money goes to the publisher. All of a sudden, the German publisher has to go back to the main publisher who owns the world rights and buy the rights back from them and not from you as the author. Now, here's the thing on world rights. Sometimes it's better to be published in an imperfect situation than to not be published at all, right? Like, what would you rather sell world rights and be an author and have a book out in the world, or would you rather like not get the opportunity? Like, there's pros and cons here, right? Like, it's still not the end of the world if you sell world rights. It's just not as advantageous to the author. So moving on to editing. How does editing work? What goes on with that? So basically, anything inside the book is the purview of the author. It belongs to the author. And this has shocked a lot of people. And I know a number of people who work in creative industries who work with publishers in various industries. And I've told them about this and they've been really, really shocked. But authors have a lot of power over their work. Essentially, everything sits with the author. All of the edits sit with the author. All of their edits are suggestions, excluding if they want you to edit out something that could bring their company into disrepute. The cover, however, is not up to the author. The author doesn't get any control over that. The publisher may ask the author's opinion, but all of the marketing material, that sits with the publisher. Anything inside the cover belongs to the author. Anything outside the cover belongs to the publisher. The timeline generally between you getting your offer and the book sitting on the shelf is roughly 1.5 to 2 years, depending. And so through the course of that time, you'll go through the experience of doing a structural edit. That's your first big edit, character and voice and narrative arcs and all of this stuff. For me, I'm currently doing my structural edit on Theodora's Tea Shop, and I'm really, really happy because it seems like there's not really going to be any big stuff to change because I already did all of that structural work with my literary agent last year. So I'm really, really happy about that. That's really, really good. And then after you do your structural edit, you move on to line editing, which is syntax, some voice stuff. It's like your sentences. And then from that, you move on to copy editing, which is basically your typos and your spelling mistakes and all of that. The last thing I want to say about publishers is to just once again know that this is not a fast turnaround industry. Everything takes a really, really, really long time. And I already knew this. I've known this for years. Whenever I have told loved ones, oh, I wrote a book, I've submitted it, and say that I've said this to them in like October, they've been like, oh my God, by the time Christmas rolls around, maybe your book will be in stores. It does not work that way, unfortunately. If you're starting to write your novel today, expect 3 years from now, minimum. That's probably the most realistic, smallest turnaround, maybe 2.5 years, maybe 2 years if you're really, really lucky and you spit out a novel really, really quickly. And that is okay. If you want a much, much, much faster timeline, maybe self-publishing is for you. However, just because these timelines are really, really long does not mean that it's not worth it. And yes, okay, the best time to have started this journey maybe was 3 years ago, but the second best time is today. It is a really, really big commitment. It will take a lot of time. It will take many, many months. You'll face a lot of rejection. You'll face a lot of stony silences and a lot of criticisms and a lot of critique, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's a very, very hard journey, but again, it's not impossible. It is achievable, but also I want you guys to be prepared with all of the context and all of the things. It does take a long time. I think that's basically most of it. Anyway, this has been a really, really long video to film. I think this has taken me almost all day, mostly because of Miss Mabel. I'm still working out how to film whilst managing a little 4-month-old puppy. My brain is fried, so I'm going to say goodbye here. I am going to put up the notes for this video on Patreon, on the free tier of Patreon, as I think I said at the beginning of the video. Please feel free to check out my debut novel, Theodora's Tea Shop. It's available for pre-order. You can add it on Goodreads. You can add it on Storygraph. It's a 1920s inspired adult fantasy novel about 2 women, one of whom wants to learn magic and the other who is this bold and interesting and vivacious witch. And there's lots of secrets and it's a little bit gothic and it's a little bit cozy. And it's set in a really cool city with lots of spirits around. I love this book and I hope you guys check it out. And also a massive thank you to everyone over on Patreon for supporting my channel. Without the beautiful people over on Patreon, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. So a huge thank you to them. Over on Patreon, we have a whole bunch of lovely bonus content, writing craft videos, a bunch of stuff like that. We have a book club, we have a Discord server, so many lovely things over on Patreon. So if you want to check that out, please click the link in the description down below. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. This took like 5 hours to film because I had to charge the battery and because of Mabel, and I'm gonna go sleep now. Goodbye.